Being a technological company, we're constantly having to reinvent ourselves. If I had to look at myself when I was a freelancer, nowadays that I run a company, I have a very different mindset.
Fabio, thank you. Thanks for joining us on the episode. It's been a pleasure to get you here, obviously in our initial conversations and earlier today as well. We kind of just did a bit of a summary. So welcome on board and really good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
It's awesome. So Fabio, let's start talking a bit of a background of where you came from and kind of, how you got to having your own company now and obviously the AI enthusiasm work and the development enthusiasm you got throughout your career. So I'll kind of hand over the mic to you for a bit just to kind of talk me through a bit where you came from and how you got to where you are.
So by profession, I'm a software engineer. I started out nearly 20 years ago, always as a developer. And after working for different people, I started freelancing. And that started pretty much immediately. So I've been freelancing, now running a company for the past 20 years. So, and after freelancing, I started working also for the companies and trying different things. Even before that, I used to work. I used to run my own hardware shop, so I used to actually build computers and sell that. However, I realized that software is really my thing. And as in fast forward to today, I run a software company. We're a team of 10 people. We cater for clients all over the world, and we specialize a lot on the blockchain and the AI space.
Okay, very good. Is there a particular if you have to compare like blockchain and AI to what's the word? The usual software development space. Is the demand there? Like, is there demand or is it niche?
I would say it's still a bit niche, but it's growing as in on another level, especially when you see the combination of AI and blockchain, as in you're starting to see a hybrid where people actually sort of want a hybrid of AI and blockchain.
Okay, very cool.
Which is quite interesting. And in fact, this year, which is what we're seeing, which is what we call the bull run, so basically a year where we expect cryptocurrency to really explode, we're hopefully going to see sort of a lot of new projects, especially within the AI and blockchain space.
That's cool.
So where they all come together.
Yeah. So mentioning the bull run, obviously we had Mark earlier on 4 episodes ago. Well, actually, for you it will be probably 6 episodes ago by the time this releases. He did mention the bull run coming in around April time as well. Yeah. So there's a lot of hype, and I can see it now online that everyone's starting back to talk about crypto, kind of reminiscing back to 2017 times almost. When there was the initial. I wouldn't say the initial, but like the biggest spike, I think, because it went from quite a lowish amount to then in the tens of thousands, right? Yeah. So in terms of crypto, sorry. So if questioning to you now, obviously you are not a financial advisor, so we need to give that disclaimer. But is it too late to start investing in crypto now?
Okay.
Is its age of investing compassed?
Again, I'm not an investor, however, I still dabble myself into crypto, and I would say it's never too late, especially with the top 10 coins, or say Bitcoin, Ethereum, and ultimately I believe in what many people say, which is dollar cost averaging. So, which in simple terms, grab whatever you can afford, let's say 10 euros a week, and keep on basically buying the same coin every single week with the same amount of money. Ultimately, I believe in the blockchain. I believe in the long term of it. But obviously, I would say be very skeptical in what coins you actually invest in. Because some people obviously really get carried away with the really sort of high percentages, and I think it's very good to keep your feet on the ground.
Yeah. So I think that's good. That's a good way of putting it without giving too much advice-y style, opinions. That's cool. So in terms of AI, right? So you are a self-proclaimed AI and blockchain nerd. What are your predictions in terms of use cases of AI in the future? So we've asked that to a couple of our guests already on the show. AI is a big buzzword right now. It's gotten now down to the non-tech world as well. So everyone's talking about it. What do you think the use cases of AI will be in the future? Like, where do you see it going?
Okay, so one thing I want to start off from is that AI has been around for many, many years. So because obviously it's the hype really grew since ChatGPT got released. And the reason why I say that is that AI has been already working really well in sort of many different facets. However, to answer your question, I think the medical space, hopefully we'll get to see a lot of, it's already happening in terms of research of cancer and then terminal illnesses. So hopefully we get to see a lot of that. I would say that aviation, and also we've seen this obviously from Tesla cars and automation of cars. And that is something that I believe that one day maybe we won't be driving at all, except the enthusiasts, like myself, who like driving the car, obviously at moderate speed, and you really
abiding by the laws and regulations.
Exactly. So I think that is going to take a major shift. However, the one thing that slightly concerns me now, being a technologist, for me, it's quite a lot to say that I believe that we're going to get to another industrial revolution. So what I mean is that certain roles will be made redundant. However, new roles will be created. So factories, even though a lot of them have been automated, but I think we're even going to get to a stage where there's going to be an even further automation, because obviously the economies of scale are fantastic. And obviously my concern about that are those people who sort of, are they aware of what's coming? Are they sort of taking enough steps to think about their growth and then sort of, an upskill?
So if you were to be one of those people, like what steps would you take to get, to the next level?
It's a good question. And quite frankly, even myself as a business owner, I still apply this to myself. So I believe in finding something that really interests you, obviously, and see how to either diversify from what you're doing. So if you're doing job X, you can see, listen, how can I somehow merge maybe what I'm doing with the new technology? How can we reinvent what we're doing? How can we? So it's a bit of a mishmash of different things. That is one thing. Another one would be obviously seeing another industry. So, for example, we've heard many cases where someone is a doctor today and tomorrow they become a YouTuber, obviously. But what I'm saying is give you another example where someone's a doctor and someone wants to become a developer. Mind you, developers are still at risk because recently, there has been this release of this new bot, this new AI bot, which possibly might start to take over certain roles.
It does all the rudimentary coding on its own, right?
Yes, exactly. But this particular one which was released...
Lily's doing this with his hands.
It depends.
I think it depends.
You spend more time kind of fixing the issues rather than...
Yes, for sure. As in ourselves, relying on ChatGPT to actually develop it is not really, you end up more, yes, the code kind of works, but there'll be so many logical errors, which obviously, again, I don't want to bore you with the details, but...
There'll be like dirty code, right? Like you need to
Exactly. More than dirty, it's more the logic is not there, ultimately you have to think about the business logic. But not to avoid, to not deviate, sort of there's this particular bot, which unfortunately I can't remember the name, where essentially literally takes over and does the whole job from sort of beginning to end. There's also, there have been a lot of what we call collaborative bots. So basically, imagine you as a project manager, me as a developer, and then a QA, and then the bots mimic those people. So maybe we're not 100% there, and I don't think developers will be replaced entirely. However, all I can say is the CEO of NVIDIA came out. So NVIDIA, just for who doesn't know, is basically one of the biggest chip manufacturers in the world. And he came out saying, listen, sort of, I wouldn't study development if I had kids. I would do something else, So it is a very interesting time.
Yes. Well, because developers were like gold.
Of course.
Up until 3-4 years ago, Still are, I think.
Yes, of course, definitely.
But so you're saying that there is a looming horizon for that to now pivot into something else.
100%. What's good about our industry is that there's always something new. So today it's AI, tomorrow it's going to be something else. They're already speaking about Web 4, Web 5. So it's like it's just going to be. I think it's a very interesting time to be alive, as in. Obviously, you put aside certain aspects of the world, but at least from a technology perspective, I think it's fantastic, as in blockchain for us is super interesting, AI, and both mixed together, super interesting.
Thank you. That's a really good answer to the question, by the way. So thank you for that. Let's talk about your company now, right? So
sure.
And I think that's probably what I would like to really focus on as well, because you are now, how many years in? 7 years in the company?
So I started Root Codex back in 2015.
Right.
Long story short, I was
9 years.
Yes, 9. Sorry.
I need to apologize. I said 7. Sorry.
No, don't worry.
I put you off track. Apologies. I will try not to interrupt.
I think it's part of getting older. You start to lose track a bit of time. It's a bit worrying. But yeah, it's ultimately, as I said before, so I started out as a freelancer, then I moved abroad. I started another consultancy there, and then I decided to come back here. Had another full-time job, and then, anyways, long story short, I said, listen, it's time to go back to what I love doing, which is running my own show. And that was 2015. So I remember January 2016, I said it's time to quit and start with Codex.
What got you to that? So when did it feel like the right time to fledge out, to build your own company? What were the factors that helped you make that? So apart from that big, I've recently done it myself. So apart from that big push, like you just want to do it, it keeps you up at night, right? What were the other factors you considered?
Okay, obviously that big itch is a huge discussion, and I'd love to touch on it at one point.
I'm going to write it down so we'll do it later.
I think ultimately, as in there are many ways to start off your company. You know what I mean? You can just literally say, listen, go cold turkey and say, I'm quitting today and tomorrow I'm starting something new. I am a bit more of a cautious person, maybe a bit more of a calculated person. So, and what I mean by that is that I had already some clients from beforehand. So in 2015, I was lucky enough to not start from scratch, because I had some clients all the way back from 5, 6, 10 years before that. So that was already something that helped a lot. But to anyone sort of out there that is starting, has a day job and say, listen, I want to start a business, my recommendation is, as hard as it sounds, is to do them in parallel. So what I mean is that, yes, obviously you go to work every single day, you go back home. For those that have kids, you attend to the kids, and then when everyone goes to sleep, it's time to work on your business. And that is how I did that for the prior to 2015, because ultimately, as in I admit, I didn't, even though back then it was slightly easier because my commitments weren't very sort of big. I still had to sort of bear in mind the aspect that I have to sort of make a wage, because I have to pay certain bills. But again, to summarize, it was all about sort of, hey, my goal is that by January, I want to turn the page and sort of start off. And I started seeking clients. Of course, there's a whole process to that, which luckily I had a bit of experience because I had started way back as a freelancer.
Let's talk about the seeking clients a bit, right? Because we've had multiple guests where they've said, we've started seeking clients, but we never really delved into the grittiness and the hard part of seeking the clients, right?
Yeah.
So how did you do it back then, and how would you do it now that we have obviously better technology to access that? Obviously, LinkedIn is much bigger these days, much more powerful than it was in 2015. So how did you do it in the past when you started, and how would you do it now?
Okay, so when I started, going back a good 10, 15 years, if not more, obviously there was no social media. So the idea was literally, as in trying to network with as many people as possible. I believe a lot in the aspect that it's more about who you know than what you know.
Yep.
As in, even though that is a bit of a general statement, as in I firmly believe that what you know will make a huge difference. So in the sense that your knowledge and what you bring to the client in terms of value is huge.
Absolutely.
However, it's all about networking. It's all about, so back in the day when there was no social media, the way I went about it was literally, I would go up to whoever I knew and say, listen, okay, this person can introduce me to X, Y, and Z. Obviously, by then, you would have had to be at a point where you already defined your product, you already defined your offering, you already defined, listen, I am about this. It doesn't have to be perfect, because sometimes we all get lost into like the perfect frame, what I mean? As in, we are about this, we are about that. Again, as in, I wasn't reinventing the wheel. I was literally, I got a service, which was web development, web design back then, and I just put my own flavor to it. And then sort of it was a lot about speaking to people and saying, listen, hey, do you need this? Do you need this? And basically telling everyone, as many people as possible, about what you do. So coming to today, because obviously we're in 2024, a different reality, luckily, I would still do the same. Ultimately, as in human contact is one of the most key things. And so I would start with that. So literally speak to everyone you know, try get involved into as many networking sessions, and tell everyone, listen, this is what I'm about. This is what I'm starting. Obviously, it's very important that you're not competing with where you're working, because obviously there's that compete aspect.
Absolutely.
Which from a legal aspect you have to be careful. And then luckily nowadays there's LinkedIn. So it's important to join the different chats, start and actually approaching people and saying, asking, hey, listen, I'm starting my own business. What do you think about this? I think sometimes it's a global phenomenon where we tend to hold back, We tend to hold back as in, it's like we don't want to kind of seek other people's feedback. And I think that is something which we really need to harness.
That is such a weird thing that you just said now, because I've come to the realization the last couple of months, right? So like when I started this podcast with Lil, even though it was kind of something I wanted to do, but because it was between me and another person, I was able to not really be that scared of showing it to the world, right? Because I knew that somebody else was involved, so we're kind of, I don't know, that risk was split in a way. I've helped other people build their dream, right? I've helped other companies grow, and I do it without a second thought, right? There's no anxiety because I know what I'm doing. I've been doing it for a long time. When it comes to like people management and operational structures and internal controls and, HR stuff, like, setting KPIs, designing job, like all that stuff. I know how to do coaching, And then as soon as I started doing my own thing, I was incredibly scared to put myself out there for some reason. Like I was being the ultimate hypocrite, because what I was telling other people to do that I know works based on my research and my education, all the time I've spent looking and reading and educating myself, and I wasn't doing it just because I was scared of taking that step in a way. And I'm still scared. I'm still scared to this day. So I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but it was really like interesting you brought that up, because it's something that I've just felt over the past 3 months trying to build my own thing. It's like I'm scared to show it to other people because I don't want people to, shit on it pretty much and break my dream,
Yeah.
So yeah. So glad you mentioned that, because I think it's for people who want to go out and build their business, it's going to be a feeling that you will definitely feel, because you have an emotional attachment now to what you're trying. Not that I don't have an emotional attachment to the podcast, but so because I had someone to depend on as well, somebody that's encouraging me and I'm encouraging him, and we're working towards that. It was a very different experience than going at it as a solopreneur.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. So yeah, no, glad you brought it up. Sorry, I forgot where you were going.
No, it's fine. All I wanted to mention is that, sometimes people tend to hold back also because it feels uncomfortable. And it's meant to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
As in, I think approaching people, telling them about your idea, and I would also add the classic, fear of judgment. People are always fearful about that. Mm-hmm. And this is something everyone suffers from, because they think, that the big whatever, people up on the very top, as in everyone's a human, as in deep down. Yeah. It's just, unfortunately, not everyone is exposing these realities sometimes. Sometimes we're always about showing, listen, we're successful and that's it. But
yeah, it's weird, right? I mean, it's just human behavior at the end of the day.
Exactly, So yeah.
I do agree with it's who you know, absolutely. I think there was I read an article about it, and it was related to people applying for jobs, especially in this landscape where there's been layoffs kind of everywhere pretty much, especially in the software development area. And it did say, don't just apply for roles, get to know people and then apply for roles that are connected to the people that you know, because you have the chances of you getting a role that you just blind apply for is very close to zero, unless it's a very skill specific role, obviously. So definitely networking is 100% agree, right? It's getting to know as many people as possible and getting your product or your service out there, getting your character across, because even when you have that conversation, you don't just talk about the product or the service, you talk about you, where you come from, what are your values, what are your beliefs, and you try and align those find clients that are in line with the values and beliefs that you have as well, right?
Yes,
So
exactly.
absolutely on board with that.
And may I add one more thing?
Sure, absolutely.
The other thing I would add is also is learning to actually listen to people. Because sometimes, we're very much about saying, listen, hey, this is what my company is about. This is what we do. But ultimately, if you're, and don't take me wrong, that is important, because if I don't know what your company does, then how am I going to engage, But ultimately, if I'm selling a service to you, as in, I need to really understand what you're about, and because I'm at least I speak for myself, as we're trying to solve a solution or solve a problem for your particular company. And sometimes I think it's a bit of a general thing where we get lost in saying, listen, what we want to say, and just forget completely about listening to other people, which is a big drawback in my opinion.
It is. It's a skill, huh?
Yes, for sure, by all means. As in,
it's a skill that, so I need to remember to, my ADHD brain stops me, I just want to interrupt every 2 seconds, right? And it's not because it's not because I'm not listening, but it's because I get excited with the topic, right?
Completely
That's why
understand.
I started the podcast, because I'm talking. So absolutely, listening is a skill. I was very lucky to have really good mentors that taught me how to listen. They kind of said straight away, all right, just chill a bit. But yes, listening, I think, and there's a saying, it's quite common, which a lot of people listen to respond rather than to understand.
Yeah.
And I think it's important when negotiating, especially when you are building a relationship with a potential client or a prospect. Absolutely, you need to listen, understand what the problem is. What's their headache? How do I cure it? How do I get their headache? Make them feel better, or give them the solution to the headache. Because then you don't need to even sell anything. You're just gonna make that relationship. And I think my initial clients that I've landed, that's how I've landed them. I didn't say, this is what I can offer you and this is my price and all that. It was what are your problems?
Exactly.
This is what I can help with based on my experience. Do some work for free at the start, because that's kind of from a consultant, that from what I do, you have to kind of show that you know what you're doing. It's not just it's not a product that's tangible, unfortunately. And then you get there. So no, absolutely, 100%. So we've covered kind of how you prepared and how you decided when was the right time. So you did it in parallel. I did it cold turkey, for example, right? So I did the other approach. Was it the right decision? I don't know. We'll see. I might be homeless in 6 months. When did you know it was time to go full time on it?
Okay, that is, I think, the time where you have to really understand your numbers. So you say, listen, at the moment, so obviously I'll speak for us from a services business, because ultimately that's my experience. I would say, listen, on a monthly basis, what are we making? And you obviously do your calculations. You say, listen, my expenses are, I'm inventing, €100 a month. If you are making anywhere between 200 or 300 euros a month, so you have a surplus of 200, I would say go for it. Now, obviously, you have to bear in mind that sometimes it all depends on the type of business you have, because you have to see how long that business is going to keep on running.
Yeah.
Because you might have clients which are just booked for 2-3 months, and then you end up having a month with nothing. So it's important to establish relationships, long-term relationships, where you say, listen, we're looking for, so this is what we do currently through Codex. We establish new relationships for the long term. And that is an advantage for the company, for the freelancer, for whoever it may be, where you say, listen, we're for the long haul, which is a fact, and that obviously gives you a sense of security, where you say, listen, I've got a client booked for X months. Obviously, you do have to take the risk with knowing that, listen, today is 6 months, because you never know what might happen. As in, I've seen situations where even when you sign the dotted line, as in, it's still not 100% safe.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to answer your question, as in, again, you have to literally be very diligent and say, what are my expenses, my personal expenses, X. What am I currently making? And obviously you do one minus the other and see obviously how that will work out every single month.
Yeah.
And then obviously you have to be aware of the fact of, for those rainy months, so it might be also a good strategy, which is something I did also in the past, where you say, listen, whilst working, I'm going to save up for one whole year. So what I mean is, if you say, listen, on next January of 2025, I'm going to quit. So what I do is from now, which is we're in March, as in I would basically sort of save up as much as possible, so that when I decide to go completely all out,
you have an emergency fund.
Exactly, you have an emergency fund.
I think Luca called it the opportunity fund. So we had Luca on episode 6, who's a money coach, and he did say that it's called an opportunity fund, where you kind of just save up, so then when you want to pursue your dream or whatever, you can do so without having to worry, when's my next meal going to be, or especially if you have a family, right? Like
for sure, 100%.
It's always there wriggling in the back of your head, like, I need to provide.
Even if you have bank loans and this kind of thing. So all those things need to be factored in, of course. Yeah,
for sure. Very good. Let's talk about burnout. I think we talked about it a bit when we were planning the conversation, but burnout's interesting, right? How do you avoid? So how did you avoid it? Because it's hard, right? When you're building your own business, especially if you're working two jobs. If you're working a job and building a business, you can very quickly get burnt out, right?
Yeah.
So how do you navigate through that?
So I didn't avoid it. I experienced it.
Okay.
And kind of good and bad, because I firmly believe that when you go through something, you really learn what something is about. I can speak about burnout as much as I want, but if I never experienced it, it's a very different situation. And I would also say burnout is also very typical because, like, for example, I speak about myself, as in I'm in business also because I enjoy the freedom to choose how my everyday goes. And the reason why I'm mentioning all of this is that is a bit of a fallacy, because ultimately the aspect of freedom is a bit of a, when you're running your own show, it's not entirely the truth, And the reason why that happens is because of the choices we make. So, and the way how it happens, the way I sort of experienced burnout is we booked a bunch of clients, and obviously a different series where I had my kids. And ultimately, I got to a point where I just had too much on my plate. And so that teaches you to say, listen, where is my limit? So, and it's not a nice place to be in, because you also have to kind of help yourself to reel back and get back into your normal sort of
It's almost
state.
You have to check your own ego as well, right? And say,
yes, very much.
Dan, you can't do this.
Yes, that is exactly it. So it's a much more elegant way of explaining it. So you have to really do a self-check-in, I believe a lot in self-awareness, where you have to say, listen, this is my limit. Also, I think when you get to that point, you need to start sort of, this happened to me roughly around 4 years ago. And that is where you start. It's a kind of a good thing, because again, I believe there's always pros and cons to everything, where you say, okay, this is the time where we need to expand. We need more people. Something that I think entrepreneurs really suffer from is releasing sort of control. Yes,
relinquishing it. Yeah,
exactly. So
I see it I see it as a constant in my clients, because I specialize in small business. It is a constant. You're right, absolutely. Especially the founder, because it's their baby, right? It's their
exactly.
It's their kid.
And ultimately, you say, listen, okay, from now on, I can handle this much. And you have to really stick by it, you know what I mean? And even sort of some basic things as your calendar, saying, listen, every day I'm going to book sort of this time to go to the gym, this kind of thing. So taking care of yourself, mental health, I think is a super important thing that we don't discuss enough, I think, from an entrepreneur's perspective. It's getting much better, in my opinion.
The stigma's kind of, the awareness.
Yes, exactly. And even from a man perspective, I think we still have this macho feeling, where we don't discuss these things. But it's getting much better, in my opinion. But I believe is that knowing your limits is super important. The unfortunate truth is that to know your limits, you have to kind of get a bit close to it.
Yeah. That's very interesting. I've experienced burnout quite a bit as well, and it's not nice when you get to that stage.
For sure.
Where your body just literally shuts down, where you just want to sleep.
Exactly.
I remember the first time it happened was just before COVID hit. and I had just gone from a very stressful job into a new one, which was equally stressful because new job was within the same company, but it was a significant shift in the type of work I did. And I remember I was just constantly very, very tired, and I think there was a month where I was just so tired, where I just could not be myself, And after that, then I realized that's where I set some boundaries. Then I experienced it again, and it usually comes with periods of change.
For sure.
And with entrepreneurial, building the business and all that stuff, it just changes. It's just
very
daily. So it's crazy. So it's good. It's good that you are open about it and you talk about burnout, because a lot of people don't realize that they are going through it as well. I think a lot of people think also that burnout is a switch where, at one point you're okay and now you're burnt out. But burnout is just
no.
You could operate on burnout for years and not even know that you are
exactly
running on fumes, essentially.
Exactly. Which is why it's very important to tune in with yourself and really know, hey, am I sort of really feeling uncomfortable? Am I not really? When I go to work, do I feel sort of a sense of hesitation? So there's a lot of those type of cues.
Yeah, I think even going to work and saying, "No, I don't feel like going in," especially if it's your own business, that's not a good sign.
Exactly.
You need to really reevaluate kind of where. That's where I think where people should know the triggering point. So I'm glad you shared it. Thank you for that. For our listeners, kind of just check in with yourselves and make sure that you are not going in that spiral, because ultimately it's just going to be a long-term suffering rather than actually nipping it in the bud early on, right?
Yeah.
It's like when you go to a doctor or a dentist.
Exactly.
A lot of people go when their teeth start hurting rather than actually checking themselves every I think 3 to 6 months is the recommended time.
3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
Case
in point, Lely just had his wisdom tooth removed as well, so I had mine done as well. I remember I hadn't gone to the dentist for a long time, and then when I went, I ended up going 4 or 5 times after, within that month, because I just had a filling here and removal there and a polish of this tooth, and this one needed something else. I was so now I go every 6 months, and touch wood. It's been okay for the last 4 years.
Oh wow, cool.
Shout out to Sarah, my dentist, she's awesome. Anyway, so if we're talking about self-awareness, right?
Okay.
How important is it as an entrepreneur and as a business owner to reinvent who you are and reinventing yourself?
I think it's the fulcrum, I think. And I think it's important for everyone, I think, to be self-aware, irrespective at what stage you are in your life. Because ultimately it also brings you aware, it makes you aware sort of your actions, and it's okay, so I had a conversation on Reinventing. I had a conversation today with one of my employees. If it didn't go well, as in you being self-aware, will actually sort of you'll be more conscious about how your approach was towards them, as in was it a case where could have I done it better, or maybe it went well. And self-awareness is literally kind of you just scanning yourself. Sometimes it's a bit tiring because you're constantly scanning yourself and saying, listen, but I think it's a very useful tool, because especially as an entrepreneur, when you're constantly meeting people, new people, or even the same people, where someone might say something and piss you off or whatever, and you're listen, should I have maybe sort of tackled it in a different way? Also, I think as a business, you need to reinvent yourself. If I had to look at myself, as in when I was a freelancer 15 years ago, whatever, and nowadays that I run a company, I have a very different mindset. Even the way we have to reinvent what we sell. Because ultimately, even though obviously being a technological company, we're constantly having to reinvent ourselves. But this is the reality of everyone out there, irrespective of the industry, where you have to constantly be out there, because otherwise you're going to get squashed by the competition.
For sure. If I had to look at my original value proposition 3 months in January when I started on my own, and now it's just night and day, right? Completely different. When it comes to evaluating kind of question about self-awareness, right? Because this is something. So I practice self-awareness quite a bit, too much sometimes, which I annoy myself because I'm like, does no one review themselves? Because I'm like, am I the only one asking myself these questions? How So how do you do it because I think that I probably do it in an unhealthy way.
Okay.
Where it impacts my confidence and I start doubting myself.
Yeah.
I second guess certain things, right? And I go through peaks and troughs of that, right? So sometimes I'm just full action. I'm super confident.
Yeah.
But then something goes wrong, so I'm like, okay, so let me take a step back now. So how does one... And this is an opinion piece, right? I'm not expecting you to give me a correct psychological response here. How does one be self-aware without impacting one's confidence or their confidence?
I think, again, this is going to sound a bit of a psychological thing, but it is. It's all about compassion, self-compassion. Sometimes, and I admit I'm very much like yourself, you know what I mean? Sometimes very self-critical, and it's like, and you take sort of the sense of self-awareness to another level. Mm-hmm. But you have to also sort of, celebrate your wins. So that sort of seals and says, listen, hey, this was great. So that already helps yourself and you say, listen, we achieved this, amazing. But I think it's important to say that even if you failed, and this is something which is a huge topic and we can spend hours talking about it, where if you failed, what have I learned rather than, and that is what self-compassion is about. It's about, listen, giving yourself slack and saying, listen, we failed, no problem, okay. What happened, and as we do this, even for small things when we release a new project, what have we learned, what have we done better, and the language you use by saying what could have we done better, not what did we do wrong yet. I mean, it sounds already much better, and by applying that with your team and even by doing that with yourself, I think it brings a much healthier. I would say a better sense of critical feedback, if that makes sense, Mm-hmm. So it's more constructive rather than destructive. Again, I'm not a psychologist here, but I love to read about this. So,
I'm very invested in this stuff as well, so I do enjoy it, and I do some coaching on the side as well. I do it full time now. I do some coaching as well, and it's always very, very common question I get from my clients as well, which is like, there's a point where you need to kind of almost ignore your self-loathing, I would say, maybe like your self-criticism, and just say, like, I'm just going to do it and figure it out as you go along, right?
And adding on to your point, you mentioned the aspect of coaching. I believe that it's worth every penny, in the sense that I imagine I have 3 coaches. And I do it in the sense, so I identify, and that's also what's good about self-awareness, where you identify where you need help or which sort of the areas where you're not strong at. So, and I sort of hire coaches as in on a monthly basis, and those different people help me in those areas, mm-hmm. sort of where I would say I need improvement. So yes, I strongly believe, and I highly encourage to anyone out there sort of that, maybe not in the beginning, because obviously when you're starting out a business, it's maybe a bit, you want to focus a bit your expenses, but as time goes by, even for someone that's been doing for many years, I highly recommend coaching with any day.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. You also said, like, not when you're starting. I think, I wouldn't probably, even as someone who does support and coach directors and founders, I wouldn't suggest anyone who's starting a business to get anyone else's opinion. Like, just do you for a bit.
Yes, for sure.
You kind of need to put the blinders or the blinkers on, and just do for a bit and just work and work and work and work.
I know sometimes too many opinions, kind of spoil the broth, and however, again, a bit of maybe going back to what I said before, it's nice to have that sense of, where someone can actually give you certain advice. And so when I go back to when I was 17 and I opened my first VAT number, as in, I was lucky that I had 1 or 2 people, at sixth form that taught me sort of how to go about that. Mm-hmm. But these were very random people I met along my journey, So what I'm trying to say is that if you have someone that can guide you on those things, especially in the beginning, because some people really get lost in the whole, how do I open a company in this? Again, don't open a company, start a VAT number only.
Open a company when you're making a certain amount of money, guys.
Exactly.
Don't do an LLC if you're earning less than 35K.
Exactly. But people get lost into these things. I have a friend of mine who wanted to start a business. How do you go about? So all I'm saying is that I think here locally we need to start encouraging more of this. People like yourself and myself, who have certain experience. That we keep on obviously pushing. And I think this podcast is already a great platform for that, you know,
I
to
think so.
actually educate these
I think so.
and help out these different
That's,
individuals.
I mean, that's what we're aiming to do. So thanks for that. But yeah, like the information is out there because the Chamber of SMEs does a really good job as well, like in terms of
Yes, it's
supporting
true, it
that.
does.
But
It
a lot of
does.
people don't know where to start and all that. And
Exactly.
to be fair, shout out to Business First because I went when I went.
Very
like
true.
they're very helpful. Like
Very
once you
true.
get there, they like genuinely they will
Very
hold your
true.
hand through the whole process. They're very very good. And everyone else who has had this experience very recently has spoken very highly of them as well.
Yes.
So there is a lot of help out there for people that want to explore this. You know, they can reach out to me and they can reach out to you if you have any questions.
Yes,
We are
of
on
course.
LinkedIn. We are over
For sure.
everywhere. I think. You know.
For sure.
And I think you highlighted also the value of networking, not just from a sales standpoint, but from a support standpoint. Because I've had a ton of people I've reached out over the past few months that were just part of people I met through the network, through this podcast, you know, where I would just call them and say, listen, I've got this, you know, this minor issue, or do you have a template for an invoice, for example? You know, I've got the template of an invoice from someone else who's in my network, right? So it's it highlights again another aspect and the importance of having a network of people and build that network.
Sure.
And you know, people will ask you for help, they will ask them, and it's almost it is a community of
100%. In fact, again, being a bit philosophical here and psychological, as we humans thrive in communities.
Yeah.
So, for example, I'm part of a small community of people who meet once a month, and people from different avenues, you know, and we share different opinions and different. Hey, listen, I have this problem. What do you think about that? You know, so super valuable.
Absolutely.
And I believe this is something that you should sort of cherish and keep for as long as sort of no matter how much experience you have.
That's it. I mean, you'll see a lot of successful businessmen have wide networks, right? I don't think no one is self-made.
No,
I think
for sure.
Right, everyone's made
very, very good
by
point.
the people they surround themselves with. So it's a lot to think about. And again, we can go into this into a lot of detail, but you know, we'll be here for a few hours if we do. Very good. A bit of a sour question here, right?
Sure.
In terms of when would you say is a time to say, I think it's time to pack it up, it's not working?
That is a very good point, and something to add on to that. It's also important to realize that when you're packing it up, it doesn't mean you're failing. It's on the contrary, you're actually sort of making an intelligent choice and saying, listen, this doesn't work anymore for me. But to answer your question, I think it's a bit of a tough one because it also depends on the type of industry, obviously. But let's speak about the services industry, because product, I would give a different advice if you have a product. When it comes to services, I think if you would have tried it out for 6 months and really tried it out, because obviously if you say, listen, I went to one networking event in 6 months, or I reached out only to 10 people, I would say you haven't tried enough. Because there's also that aspect, you know, if you have to really push it. Mm-hmm. Especially the first 3 years are always the 3 critical years where a business can fail. Mm-hmm. So if you would have done really your homework in those 3 years, meeting as many people as possible, networking and telling everyone, even your cousins, whoever, and telling them about what your business is about, what you're actually doing now, I would say after 6 months it would be time to review and say, as in myself as a company, you know, that we've been around for quite a few years now, as in we still have a review session where we say, listen, every 6 months, where are we at? You know, and obviously it's also time to reinvent yourself. You say, listen, okay, here we are. This is doing well, this is not doing well. So to answer your question, again, a smaller business maybe that's starting off, you would obviously have this review session maybe on a monthly basis. Mm-hmm. As in, how did we do this month? What can we improve? I think this constant questioning yourself, even though it can seem like you're constantly questioning yourself, I think it's very healthy and important.
Right. So setting time to do that, I think, probably would be a good starting
yes, exactly.
Right.
Mind you can even extend it to a year if you like, because ultimately, as I mentioned before, and your previous guest mentioned, if you save for 1 year, you know what I mean, you have that opportunity where you say, listen, I'm happy to blow that money and say, listen, and then see how it goes.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Okay, and I think it goes hand in hand with having like realistic milestones as well.
100%, yes. Like thank you. That's a very good point. Like for example, as in obvious expectations is a super important thing. As in setting an expectation that on the first month you're going to make I don't know $1 million. You know what I mean? Is a bit unrealistic. You know, obviously I'm being very just to prove
bombastic,
a point. Exactly. But I think there's an element. Yes, I think expectations are very, very important. And I think I would also add not giving up. I know it's a bit of a cliche where it's like as they say Maltese taqtax qalbek, but it's something which I see a lot of people doing, where they dabble, you know, with the idea they like entrepreneurship because of the freedom of making. There's no ceiling to how much money you can make.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I like about entrepreneurship. However, after a month or two, it's like the idea fizzles, and you never hear anything from. You know, this is months of work. It could be even years.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have to draw a line at one point. And obviously depends at what stage you are in your life, etc. So what I'm trying to say is that sort of questioning and really sort of looking inwards, I think is super important. But also not giving up.
Mm.
Again, cliche, but super
important. But absolutely agree there, right? I've had moments of doubt in the last 3 months, and I'll be like, should I just go find a job and all that? And then I'll be like, no, just keep going. And then stuff comes,
Yeah.
What I've learned as well is like the work I did in week 1 started showing the results in week 5, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like what you're doing right now, you might not see the results, but then it will start happening. Yeah. Things will come into place and it will fall into it. So to anyone listening that is going through this process, like, again, just keep going, and keep believing in what you're doing, keep improving, keep tweaking, and it eventually will lead to something.
And something I would like to add on top of that is, we really get lost in like building the perfect product, the perfect pitch. Something I think was something which I really highly recommend is gauge the interest. So if you're building a product, if you're building, a demo or something, just put a landing page together. So literally a website with just one page saying, hey, this is what we're about. Put in your email address, register interest. And that will start to give you sort of a very good understanding of the interest behind your service, behind your product. And without actually building anything. So obviously, and by actually generating interest, you say, yes, we have something. This service has legs, this product has legs. And that obviously saves you time and money, because sometimes people go in, and they invest 100K in a prototype and stuff, and obviously services is much cheaper to run. As in fact, I would always recommend a consultancy or services business over anything. But ultimately, anyone out there might say, listen, I'm not a services person. I want to focus on product. Mm-hmm. However, I also think that it still applies for services, you know what I mean? So for example, we're coming up with a new service now in the next few months, but we gauge interest. We don't build anything. We go out there, we say, hey, listen, this is our new service. And we put in an email address. Obviously, we even approach people on LinkedIn. What do you think? And we start obviously gauging the interest. And if the interest is high from that, either from the chats we have or else from the email responses that we would have received, we know we have a winner. Mm-hmm. If not, don't bother wasting your time on that. And so that is a way, I think, which it's important that people who are starting out, and it's good to learn that from the beginning, because it really can save a ton of time.
Very interesting. Thanks for that. That's so that's how you test the market, like before you, that's very cool. Okay. Shall we delve a bit into the development aspect now? So getting into your niche and into your specialty, I guess, or your expertise. Now that you're an established company, right? So when you meet a new client, when you onboard a new client, like what are the initial steps you take, like with the company? Like how do you define the problem? And I really want to get granular with it, because we've had software developers here, but we've never really gotten into the nitty-gritty of it.
So we have a defined process. So once a client approaches us from the first day, we say, listen, we have actually a pitch deck, and we say, hey, this is our process. Again, and this is the part where we really spend time listening. And this is even before we even sort of hand over a quotation. We say, hey, listen, what is the problem? And we have a set of questions where we start to ask and really understand and really harness sort of or try and understand what the problem is about. Because the last thing we want to do is deliver a product or a service at the end of the day which is not tailored or actually solve the problem. So I would start off with one word, which is listening. And obviously having these different sessions, which what we call workshops, where we have sort of different sessions with different key stakeholders, because sometimes you can have a session with the top management. However, it might be the people sort of who are, I'm eventing in the call center, or people that are actually doing the operations. And that feedback is super critical. Obviously, it depends on the nature of the business. But
absolutely,
at least that is step one of many.
Okay, interesting. And if I were a potential client, right, like looking to get into get a consultant, like a development consultant with us, what should I look out for before getting in touch? So what should I have ready, or when do you think it's time to contact the software company?
Okay, well, it obviously depends on the requirements. However, we have clients where in fact our clients are those that don't have any tech in-house, and they basically outsource all their assets to us. When I say assets, obviously the different websites, any different software solutions they might have in-house. So quite a big, it can be quite a big portfolio. And those type of companies are, I think, the best sort of situation where they can say, listen, sort of, hey, we should outsource, and this company will handle everything, because their core business might not be just the tech. It might be the marketing, it might be the SEO, it might be Google adverts, it might be Facebook ads, or it might be, for example, a company like yourself, where you're running podcasts, where you're about generating video, and we would handle the technology for you. So it's a lot about companies that their focus or their core is something else. But the tech is still very important, but they don't have the time to handle that. And so that would be obviously an ideal scenario. The last one, or another scenario, would be when people don't have enough staff. As in, staffing is obviously a big problem globally. As in, I speak to so many people, and it's very hard sometimes to find good stuff, because there are many people, but when you start to vet their CV, you're like, it obviously doesn't pan out, or sort of, you know what I mean. So
also, outsourcing is becoming more and more popular nowadays.
It has, yes.
It's like even like HR and payroll. From what I see, like from what I do now as well, it's like I'm a manager, I'm an outsourced director.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
In fact, we call that fractional. So there's a lot of fractional CMOs nowadays, CEOs. As in, we are kind of a fractional CTO with all the team behind it, if that makes sense, But yes, it makes sense, because sometimes you find companies that they need you for 1 year, and then and then sort of the project is complete.
I think even from an expertise standpoint, though, like if I had a business where I've got employees and organizational structure that I need to cater for, I would probably opt for a fractional rather than a full-time CMO. I think for the sake that a full-time paid employee, and I'm thinking about this, I could be wrong, but a full-time employee has no reason to chase new trends and learn and stay up to date with the discipline that they're in.
For sure.
Whereas someone who's fractional is exactly the opposite. They are chasing knowledge, and they are constantly up to date with new laws and regulations, for example, if it comes to like HR, or if it comes to payroll or accounting, right? So I think that's why it's in popularity. And well, nothing popular is not valuable in the world of work.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
So I think if people are going to outsourcing, it's probably because they're finding more value for money, and it probably costs you either the same, if not less, than to hire a full-time CTO.
Yeah.
For example.
In fact, again, without sounding salesy, because sometimes it costs the client less, because for a monthly fee, we're bringing them 3 or 4 people.
Yeah.
It's just if you have 4 people, it could be you're using 2 people most of the time, and the other 2 you're using for half the time. So what I mean is just it doesn't make sense to hire the 4 people for that client. You know what I mean? So yes, that can have quite a few benefits, and It's just that sometimes, people, as companies don't realize that. They tend to say, listen, I want to bring everyone in-house, which is good and bad, pros and cons, eh?
Yes, I think there are pros and cons. I think the pros, though, like thinking about it now, more recently as well, the pros outweigh quite a bit now.
Yeah.
Because again, it just brings this fresh perspective on something. Like especially if you're building a whole software platform for a company, eh? Like you need some outside influence.
For sure.
Because if you have people that are designing the software internally that have always been there for like 15, 20 years, they're just going to design something that's going to cater for what you're doing now rather than what you can, what your potential can be, right?
Yeah.
Going on the subject of reinventing.
Yes, of course.
Super, super interesting. Yeah. So like the fractional concept is very up and coming.
Yes,
and I'm glad, right?
Ultimately, this is something that has been going on for a long time. So even though now there are these buzzwords, fractional, and this kind of thing, when we look at the online gambling space, there are so many companies that outsource. They bring on consultants. I think this was something that was very popular in certain Nordic countries, and in the UK it's very popular to get consultants. Now here it's starting to get even more popular, I think, and it's good. I think there's a market for that.
Absolutely, I hope so. That's what I'm doing. Good stuff. So, how do I phrase this? What are your plans now for your company? Like, what's next? So, like, blockchain is constantly evolving, right? And there's a lot of people don't know what the blockchain really is. And we dabbled into that topic with Mark. When we had him over here. So I don't want to get too much into the blockchain.
No problem.
Like, what's next for the company? Like, where do you see the company in 3 to 5 years, right, doing?
Okay, so I'll speak also about myself for a second. As a company, we're also diversifying. So in fact, now recently, I set up a new company, which is specializing a lot on affiliate marketing and this kind of thing. So myself, as a business person, I like to diversify and start different businesses. In fact, I had many startups where nowadays they don't even exist. Another story for another time. But all I'm saying, I think it's very important to diversify. In the beginning, maybe not. In the beginning, it's good to focus on one company, grow that. And anyways, but to answer your question, it's more about that. So focusing on these two companies. Obviously, I want to grow Codex even bigger, and even the other company, which is I'm in partners with other people. And ultimately, sort of moving more onto the blockchain space and incorporating that with AI. Obviously, we are a remote company, so we're 10 people and everyone's scattered all around the world. So, and I'm very proud to say that we have all international clients from all over the world. But now, obviously, we want to focus a bit on the Middle East. The Middle East is huge from blockchain and AI. I think I would dare say that Dubai is becoming the Silicon Valley version 2.0. Again, obviously San Francisco will be always one of the top, and even other countries. But I think Dubai has invested, imagine, around 5 billion in just blockchain. And I think we really want to sort of focus on that and really sort of meet some really interesting people, and build some solutions more about that.
Very cool.
But as a company also, we want to become a bit more product focused. So like, for example, before I mentioned a new service, the service I think is more of what we call a product, even though if someone had to meet me, sort of it's a service in the end, but it's rather than sort of saying, hey, listen, we offer sort of tailored solutions, we're starting to offer more products than a service,
Very cool.
So it's about diversifying. That is the element. As in, it's a very competitive space. In fact, even from a web development perspective, we like to do more enterprise and larger projects, because the smaller projects is a very competitive area. Ultimately we're competing against the globe, especially after COVID. When people realize remote work, where we've been doing remote since 2016. It's like. It's open to the world, where...
Shall we get into remote work?
As much as you wish. I'm a huge advocate.
It's like, obviously it is an issue internationally now, but like locally I see it very much a big issue with the mindset of a lot of founders as well, like thinking that there's an element of trust that goes away. And I've always been an advocate for remote work. I've always been an advocate for, I think I did a post on LinkedIn recently, like focus on the results, not the amount of hours an employee puts in.
My mantra.
I would much rather have an employee that puts in 8 hours of deep work and gives me the same results as somebody that puts 40, because it just shows capability, right?
Yes, of course.
What are your thoughts around that?
So I think it's all about who you hire. So I would say it's, and my focus as a company. So when I started the company and eventually I got to a point where I had to start hiring people, my mantra was one, as in I'm going to hire people, one of the same mindset. So for me, culture is top. And I'll bring that culture point in 2 seconds, because it's remote work, obviously, and culture is a bit of an issue.
Yeah.
But once you hire the right people, the people that you can trust, that add value, and you show them, listen, we're not a company about, hey, 9 o'clock, you have to be in, and 5 o'clock. No, we're not about that. For me, people can come and go, as in, if you have a doctor's appointment, I'm not about that. For me, what I'm very strict about is the deadline. If we agree on a deadline of date X, it's important that we deliver by then.
Absolutely.
Ultimately, we have responsibilities to other clients. Clients are running their own businesses, and we cannot let them down. So, and something to touch upon a bit with the first conversation is trust is everything. So whoever is seeking clients, it's always to build upon trust. Always show that you are, and not just obviously just for appearances, but actually show that you're trustworthy, and what you're saying is actually what you will be delivering upon. But about remote work, as in, I am very strict also on the hiring process. As in, for now, obviously, we have an HR consultant who helps us out. However, as in, I am constantly hiring myself, because, and sometimes people say, wow, man, you are really, you're really strict on how you hire, Obviously, we have the technical capabilities, but for me, it's also about the personality. Because you will really know, if this person is about, hey, are you just coming there to earn, a salary, or are you about, listen, you want to make, a difference with your role,
Yeah.
And for me, it's about hiring those people. Again, and it's not easy, because sometimes we really struggle to find good people. And that sort of ends up, it leads you on to the other aspect, where it becomes easy to trust people. You're like, listen, obviously, you still have to keep, a sort of a certain lookout onto your employees, but when I watch out for my employees, it's not about, listen, the hours they spend. It's more about, listen, about their growth.
Are you getting the right support? Do you have the right tools?
Exactly, and even from a development perspective, listen, you're working on these technologies. What do you want to learn tomorrow? So their growth is super important. So for us, they're not just an employee there to deliver project X. For us, they're human beings, people that we really value. And that's how remote work works for us. Also, it gives you the opportunity to hire from all over the world. We have people all the way from Canada. We have people in Ukraine. We have people based in the UK. Locally, we don't have anyone, but it's unfortunate. But all I'm saying is, it's something that, again,
very interesting, and I agree with it. Like, and you mentioned the word personality. I came across a video a few weeks back about the importance of the personality hire, of the person that maybe does not have the best skill set, but but there's like scientific data attached to it. I'm not a scientist. Look it up if you need, if you want to learn about it. But like the importance of having somebody who's that kind of that bonding agent between everyone, and the person that speaks up in the meeting if the vibe is off, right? Or if they feel that maybe that customer is not particularly happy. These people are usually like the empaths, the intuitive guys. They figure out how to make a situation a bit better, like people around them, and elevate them into a better vibe or in a state of mind where they can work and produce. So
for sure,
personality is absolutely important. Culture is top, like it has to be. And I think the leader has to drive the culture.
100%.
And there's so many cliche and so many like these
yes,
cringy
sure.
sayings.
Simon Sinek.
yeah, absolutely. But it is repeated and it is enjoyed so much in terms of those phrasings because they actually work. And I see so many leaders talk about culture, but then do the exact opposite of what they're talking about.
Yes.
Which goes back, circling back to the self-awareness bit, like you need to act out the culture day in, day out, 100%. Right? If you're talking about caring for your employees, then care for your employees. Check in with them. Yeah. What do you need? Like, how can I help you? Look like you need a day off. You look very tired. Like, leave early today. Don't worry about that work. Then you talked about deadlines. Like, for me, accountability is super important. It's always been when I manage teams. It's always been when I manage my own work now. If you promise something, then do it. Like that is your credibility. You're building on top of that. And yes, absolutely. That's the balance you need to reach with employees, I would imagine, right?
For sure.
Trust and accountability.
Now, on the flip side, and I want to mention this because I am very much someone that likes to see both sides of the coin.
Yeah.
Remote work and culture is a very hard thing to do.
Yeah.
So, for example, now, in fact, hopefully this summer we're going to plan, a meetup. So we all meet in one country or we all meet here. So it's, again, but that is not easy, and obviously you have different cultures, different beliefs, belief systems. Sometimes even there's the whole geopolitical aspect, which you have to be really conscious and aware. So, and this ties in a lot with self-awareness, because ultimately you have to really be sensitive towards the people and say, listen, this, that, So, but yeah, so all I can say is that because, again, I've had a lot of chats about remote work, and there's a lot of that aspect that I wouldn't say it's for everyone. And that's one. And also second thing is it's not easy. So for example, something really silly, but we once every month, we have basically a games night.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, a games afternoon, not a tree night. But
depends what part of the world they're from.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, but literally everyone's on their laptop and we're literally playing something. And it's again, it might sound silly and but that is a way of bonding, because whilst we're sort of playing, we're actually discussing about, and you're learning about the other person,
Absolutely.
So you do have to think about these things. And I know the challenge is that sometimes as a leader, you're very much getting lost into the operations, and you have to and then say, hey, listen to people, because, for example, myself, I'm the only one here locally. So, you get automatically really lost in operations, you get lost in the management, and you're like, okay, so I make myself aware that now we need to do, obviously, a follow-up with each and every single employee, and say, hey, listen, where are we? What do you feel you need? So yeah, you have to.
It's tricky to maintain that level of balance, isn't it?
And you have to bear in mind that we're not obviously a fully sort of company of 500 people, sort of. So we have obviously the resources we have, but I think we're pretty much doing well with what we have. So yeah.
Well, you've survived 9 years, right?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure good things to come. Can I ask you why you called it Root Codex? What's the?
Okay, so I'm not the best at names, I have to admit.
It's a good name.
I don't remember names, but so Root Codex is basically a split of two, thanks to my partner, because she really helped me with this. So Root is basically the administrator username for a Linux server.
I remember that from my Linux days.
Exactly, and Codex is basically is a library of information. So obviously Root because I'm a bit of a tech nerd, and the Codex because we are obviously a company that has a wealth of knowledge and we love to share it with whoever.
Very interesting.
So yeah,
that's a good name. That's a good name. Before we close, I always ask this to every guest. If you've seen any of the episodes, you probably
I have.
you probably kind of know about what's coming. But if you had one message to give to the world, what would that message be?
Wow, where do we start from? I think it's all about sharing. So again, and I actually tell this to my kids. So, but we need more of that. We need people like ourselves, who have a certain experience. It's all about really taking care of the younger generation and also those people who are sort of starting out. Again, it doesn't have to be a younger generation, because it could be someone who's in their 50s, 60s, you know, who decided to start a business. And when someone reaches out, you know what I mean, to try find that time to spend with them. Again, just give me 10 minutes, you know what I mean? Because ultimately, obviously, everyone has their own thing. But I think I would start from that and always stay ahead of the curve, because we're in a world where you have to really reinvent yourself, not only as a human being, so even understanding people more, but also even from a technology or whatever is out there, you know. Pick any topic or industry, and there's always something new to learn about.
Thank you. Very, very different answer than the trend.
What is generally the trend?
No, usually it's more of an emotional response.
Okay.
Like be kinder to people, or you know, seek help if you need to. I forgot what the other ones are, because we haven't filmed for a while.
Fair enough.
Because we had a bit of a good what's the word, like, with a good little vault of episodes. Vault, backlog, whatever you want to call it.
Ultimately, you know, as in the reason why I told you sort of I came here, I mean, for me, it's about, you know, really trying to help out, because I put myself in their shoes when I was 17, you know what I mean, as in I had no one to help me with this, you know.
That's it, right? And in fact, I remember the initial conversation, and you know, that's what you said, like, just, you know, I just want to be there. I just want to give as much information as I can. And,
exactly, you know.
You know, these types of platforms, I think that's why we've created this podcast, is just to help
exactly. People. And we're really lucky, because in this day and age, there is all of this information out there.
That's good. No, thank you. It's been a really cool conversation.
My pleasure.
Really different conversation than usual, so very fresh.
I'm glad
as well, which is what we're trying to do. So hopefully, when this releases, people can feel the same level of I think like the same level of care and interest in how to work with others, how to build your own business, you know, how to build relationships, network, you know, build a really good service or product that's going to really help change how people work. So Fabio, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
It's been awesome. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Cheers.